Did dinosaurs really live millions of years ago? If
Yeah.
so, why do we find collagen and blood vessels and other soft tissue in dinosaur fossils that are supposedly between 65 million and 100 million years old? That is the challenge before Nathan tonight. Nathan believes in evolution. I don't. And we're taking turns giving each other a weekly challenge. His challenge to deal with tonight is, why are there soft tissues in dinosaur? I don't know why you went off the screen. Why are there soft tissues in dinosaur bones that are supposedly millions of years old? So go for it, Nathan. Let's jump right in.
Well, first, I just want to say I thought this was a very interesting topic, and just let people know out there, I didn't know anything about this. Rebekah did provide me one creationist video to watch, so I did have a little bit of research. It was just all creationist information, and I thought it was very well done, and maybe we can give a plug for that video. And so, in thinking about this, so first of all, if there's any experts out there who want to chime in, any unfair friends who are evolutionists, I would highly appreciate your input tonight as I wrestle with this insidious creationist data that's coming my way. And I think when thinking about it, so first of all, what we're talking about here is not alive. I think we need to make that clear. It is structures that are in organisms, and we're talking about collagen tonight, which is basically a form of connective tissue. I think it's a form of fat. And anyway, it's an amino acid chain that connects things together, and it's highly stable. But you know, uh, at least according to this video, and according, I assume what scientists think is that it is strange that it's persisting so long, or that it would persist so long. So anyway, if I have any unfair friends, give a shout. Give me a life raft here. Throw me a little donut or something into the water. Um, so when I was thinking about this, there are two things I wanted to think about. Number one, is the signal we're receiving true? All right. And what I mean by that is the way that we're creating or demonstrating that collagen is in the fossils, is that process somehow bringing about the collagen? And I think generally my answer to that is no. I think it probably is there, but that is one way to look at this. And then the other way to look at it is, are we able to accurately reproduce the conditions in the ground to show that what we're doing in the lab, or what these creation scientists and these other secular scientists or whatever, long or old Earth evolution scientists who also found this, are they able to accurately reproduce the conditions that the fossils are exposed to over millions of years? So those are the two things that I wanted to look at. And so, in terms of the process of reconstruction, or pulling out the collagen, they took the fossils and they demineralized it somehow. I don't know how they're dissolving the minerals, but I'm guessing it's some sort of, I don't know, acidic solution or something like that. These are amino acids, so maybe it causes some rejoining to happen. I don't know. But generally speaking, I think it would be completely. I mean, if it was just gone, it would not do that. So I do think that the collagen still is there. And so, really, most of my thinking about this topic is going to focus on the accurate reconstruction of the conditions in the ground. So, do you want to talk a little bit about what the process is that is being done to create this, or to replicate this decay curve of the collagen?
Yeah, sure. And I want to give a little bit more history too, because, it's interesting that you hadn't heard a single thing about this. And you're someone who reads about science a lot. So, this to me is a good indicator that there's some obfuscation going on because, this is a very, it's a finding that really shocked the scientific community. And in fact, it was rejected for quite a while until it had been reproduced over and over again to the point where there's very few people out there who will still say this is contamination because it's been reproduced so many times. In fact, there's been over 100 scientific papers published from scientists all over the world who have found the same thing in fossils that are millions of years old. So go
Well, let me
ahead.
just address that. I think this is an interesting topic. I do think it kind of goes to the core of why we're having these talks. So maybe if we just take a break a minute, I agree with you that the scientific community is made up of humans, and there have been instances, there are multiple I know of at least, in the past where possibly a human element is entering into the process, and you can see that. I think the weight of electrons was one of them, where the original person who came up, with the measurement, and it was just earth shaking and everything, got one measurement, but they had done something wrong, and everybody progressively over time slowly got to the real value, probably because they didn't want to publish their value that was so far different than that one. And so I do think it is important to say that there's a human thing going on. But honestly, with this one, I think you might be right. The same thing might be happening, but it also could have been like yawn. Okay, moving on. I don't know, because most scientists probably, you know, they're probably not going to go. Okay, I'm going to devote my time and resources. First of all, where are they going to get funding to test this or whatever? But maybe they're like, okay, well, this is not exactly what I want to do, or maybe it has to do with too much with chemistry, and I'm more of a, you know, I'm interested in, dinosaur or something else. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's like obfuscated, like, oh my gosh, who knows why papers are getting rejected or whatever. That's all.
Well, I want to push back on this a little bit because I want to give an example about how the media goes crazy with every new like thing that related to evolution or evolutionary timescales. Last year, one paper came out, or 2 years ago, one paper came out that suggested a possibility of the universe being 26 billion years old. And this was to try to deal with some of the problems with the JWST telescope discoveries. So one guy writes one paper suggesting the possibility of the universe being 26 billion years old. And every media outlet went crazy covering this. I found basically every media outlet had to jump on it and grab it and put out an article on this. So it's really strange to me that that same thing hasn't happened for this dinosaur soft tissue, which is startling, shocking, shocking to the scientific community. And so my guess is because it disrupts the evolutionary timeline, and there's currently no scientific explanation for could have how this collagen and other soft tissue could still be there. And so they don't want to disrupt the evolutionary timeline without a rescue device, without a way to
Oh,
still keep their timeline.
well, I'm so glad you mentioned rescue devices, because I'm gonna, I'm really good at theory crafting, so this is where I think I shine. So I'm gonna try and provide them some possibilities. Okay. All right. So
Wait,
um,
but I didn't do my slides yet. We got off on a
well,
tangent.
you
Let
do
me
so many slides, Rebecca. I mean, come on. All right, go ahead.
look. I want you to have the facts before you start theory building. Okay.
All right.
So the normal half-life of the peptide bonds that hold proteins together, including collagen, it's normally about 500 years. It can vary based on what exact, sequence or whatever. But studies show, and you saw one of the studies that was done, and there are other secular studies that have been done to show the max possible age for any remaining collagen is 700,000 years, and that's under ideal conditions, and that would only be like the smallest amount of collagen possibly left. Like after 7 half-lives, okay, you would have basically almost no collagen left, no matter what. Even under ideal conditions, the max would be 700,000 years. Okay, so this lady, Mary Schweitzer. Now, there was a study done earlier in 1966 that people like to reference that showed the same thing, but it was like lost in, basically, this is the lady who brought this to the forefront. Okay. And back in late 90s, early 2000, and she basically accidentally discovered this because she left her dinosaur fossil in acid too long, and it actually took away all the bone, but it left this,
The minerals.
Yeah, it took the minerals away, and it left this substance. And when she looked at it under the microscope, she was shocked. So she actually was afraid of this discovery because she knew that she would be ridiculed for it. She reproduced it a bunch of times because her first paper that came out was ridiculed, and they said it was contamination. She kept reproducing it and reproducing it. And she also did this where she took recent bones from recently dead animals, like an ostrich and an emu, and then she compared that with fossils from mammoth and mastodons, and then also compared that with the T-Rex fossils. And so found very similar structures. Now, the ones that were more modern were more intact, but this was more evidence that this is actually what is being seen. And now it's been reproduced by so many scientists around the world. Now it is not really controversial that this is actually collagen and other things, and it's been tested in several ways. And I'll show you an article about that. But I wanted to read this from this article. It says the survival of proteins from the Cretaceous period was not thought to be possible. Okay, it was not thought to be possible. Okay, so previous analyses of dinosaur peptides and soft tissues have been criticized as potentially arising from unknown contamination, from biofilm, or from being statistically insignificant. Okay, but their conclusion is that they found robust support to the identification of these still soft hollow structures as remnant blood vessels produced by the once living dinosaur. Now, this is, like I said, this is not just one, this is many people doing this. And this was an article about the different types of analyses that they have done with this. This is not just looking under a microscope and seeing these structures. They actually do different chemical tests and analyses of the organic compounds in dinosaurs. And they have found through a variety of testing that all of these things are present. Pigments, collagen type 1, which is like bone, skin, and blood vessels, collagen type 2, which is cartilage and tendons, and beta carotene, which is claws and feathers, found in claws and feathers. So this is all the places in the world where they have found dinosaur fossils with these compounds. And this is an attempt by someone else. Maybe I'll stop there. I'll let you give your analysis, and then I'll talk about some of the attempts to figure out how these soft tissues could remain in dinosaurs that
So
long.
thank you. All right. So I love theory crafting. I love creating hypotheses. So I'm just going to go at it. And so number one, like I said, I think that these are amino acids, so it's an acidic environment. I think one of the things, I think there's going to be several things that play here that are helping to preserve these amino acids for long time scales. And number one is the environment. So I think that obviously if the dinosaur had fallen into a more basic environment, you see all these crime shows where they throw lime on bodies or something like that. So I think if it had been thrown into a more basic environment, then we wouldn't necessarily be seeing this. So there are very specific conditions under which fossils are created, and I think it has to be two things. I think it's acidic, like volcanic ash, that kind of thing. And number two, hypoxic. So I think that the lack of oxygen is important. Oxygen is a reactive material. And so I think that if you had oxygen present in sufficient quantities, it would also cause degradation. So those are two things that I think are important. And then in terms of the recreation of the problem, I only have the video that you showed me to go on. But in that case, what they did is they took bone fragments, they ground them down to a certain size of living bones from dead animals today, and then exposed them to heat, different levels of heat over time in neutral water. Okay. So, and then they were trying to increase the amount of degradation of the collagen artificially to see how long it would persist. Okay. And so I think that there are a couple differences between what they did and what's happening in the ground, obviously. Time being one of them. But that's the whole point of their experiment, to increase the rate of time. And so, number one, their way of reproducing it doesn't include pressure. Okay, so temperature and pressure are going to impact chemical reaction. And so, in the ground, you might have higher levels of pressure, and that might help maintain the structure of the amino acid chains. And number two, if you're grinding down the bones to a certain size, right, then you're losing the protective effects of the structure of the bone itself. So even with bacteria, we see, or cancer. Let's talk about cancer. You can put cancer cells individually into a solution and put a therapeutic in there, and it will kill the cancer. But in the body, the cancer exists inside of a structure, and that structure has a hypoxic area in the middle, which is where there's not as much blood flow. And so the therapeutic has a hard time getting in to those cancer cells in the middle. Okay. And I think that this is also true with this with these amino acids. So you have a fossil that's underground, and so the bone surface at the edge of this giant structure is exposed to the elements and becomes fossilized. And then eventually you have this stuff that's sitting in like an egg of minerals deep underground, away from all oxygen, preserved in a acidic environment that's conducive for protecting these amino acid chains. So I think here what we're seeing is that the conditions under which the fossils are generated is also protecting the stuff within from degradation. And so I think that collagen is persisting for millions of years, which is extraordinary. But I don't think that it's the silver bullet that's going to kill evolution.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting idea. And there have been other, ideas that have been proposed and tested. And thus far, there hasn't been anything that has been able to show how collagen can survive for millions of years. So it's a nice hypothesis. It hasn't been tested, but some other ideas have been tested. So I will bring those up. So basically, there's been some different chemicals that have been used. And to be honest, I don't remember what this one was, but there's been a couple of different tests where they were trying to get something that would cause a cross-linking of the
Oh,
peptide. Yeah.
iron, is this the iron thing that they were mentioning in Joel's
This
video?
one I don't think is the iron. One of them is iron. So one of them is iron. So we can talk about that. But so basically there are ideas about how it can work, but I picked this one in particular. None of them have, shown that it can help last for millions of years. Okay. So they've shown that they can extend it a little bit, but not for millions of years. But what's interesting about this one is that I noticed the circularity in the conclusion. If you just see what it says here, it says, so using both experimental and computational tools, we have discovered that in pi star, whatever that means, interactions protect prolyl esters from hydrolysis. This discovery has implications for the stability of collagen, which is replete with whatever this is, interactions, and has remained intact for at least hundreds of millions of years, exceeding the half-life of a peptide bond by 1,000,000-fold or more. Okay, so do you see the problem with what is written here?
Okay, so something to something interactions protect protyl esters from hydrolysis. Okay, hydrolysis. I think that is the oxygenation of it. I don't know. The discovery has implications for the stability of collagen, which is replete with blah blah blah, and has remained intact for. Okay. I. I mean, I'm not sure. There's a
Okay.
block of text here that I don't actually understand what they're saying, so it's hard
Yeah,
to defend or attack.
what we're unclear about is what this little N to the pi star stands for. Okay, I'm unclear on that.
Or honestly, hydrolysis. I mean, I don't hydrolysis, so breaking up based on water, I
Water.
assume, but I don't.
Yes.
But I don't know. I don't know exactly what's happening there. Yeah.
Okay, but look what it says. Okay, so it's saying that collagen is replete with these interactions. Okay,
So
fine.
with yeah, some sort
Yeah,
of
but
esters. An
but then
ester is a yeah. Anyway, keep going.
okay, so I don't understand that myself, but I picked up on what it said here, which is and has remained intact for at least hundreds of millions of years, exceeding the half-life of a peptide bond by 1,000,000-fold or more.
Yeah.
So
So they're basically saying this thing is more long-lived than we think because it's been around for millions of years. So they're assuming that it's been around for millions of years. That's what you don't
yes,
like.
yes, that's what I don't like. Because
Yeah.
what could possibly, if you can't question the model, right?
Mhm.
When something contradicts the model, but you don't question the model, then is this really science anymore?
I definitely think it is, because I think that there is a lot of evidence that the Earth is old and that the universe is old. I mean, a huge amount of evidence, and so I don't think there's any problem with someone saying, um, we're taking a look at this thing again because it's longer lived than we expected. So they're trying to find some sort of novel use for this, or find something new out about it. I think that's fine. This is in the conclusions. I don't know what the actual paper about this Esther thing and what they're actually saying is here. Um, but I think, just going back to my hypothesis, I think one of the issues here is, I think that the people who are in geology and the people who are in chemistry might be underestimating the power of biology. You think about biofilms. Okay, you have individual cells, bacteria or whatever, and they have evolved. They have evolved to work together with other bacteria and to create colonies, and it's to defend themselves. I mean, you think about the bacteria in your mouth. We are constantly trying to kill the bacteria in our mouth by putting powders and chemicals and gargling with salt water and eating hot foods, and I mean, just all this stuff, right? And these cells, these bacteria, they have to survive all of that stuff. Well, how do they survive? How do individual bacteria survive? They don't individually survive. They survive as a group of cells, some of them and some of others. And this is the problem that cancer people again have. A cancer cell by itself is weak, but a cancer cell in connection with all of these other systems and processes and other cells creates a fortress that protects it from chemical changes on the outside and therapeutics that are actually designed specifically to bind to them and kill them. So, this is what scientists are having to figure out. How do we get at these interior cells to break them up? And the same is true with these collagen things. And collagen, like, is connective tissue. It's very strong, and it's shielded by layers and layers of other collagen and layers of rock, and at the end of the day, in this fossil, right? So you've got this concrete bunker for this collagen, and I'm not surprised it's surviving that long. I mean, it's surprising, but it's not that surprising to me that it's surviving, because it's a biological thing that's designed, evolved to bind things together and stay intact. It's like if you take spider web and you shield it with a concrete bunker in conditions where it's stable, I bet you can get a spider web back out after millions of years. I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, but at least acknowledge. I mean, your faith is, hey, it's just through the roof. But the normal, this is what you're suggesting, is that the normal half-life of a peptide bond is now exceeded by a millionfold or more. So that's actually what's being suggested here. So
Well,
I agree. I actually agree with you. I agree with you that, there's strength in numbers and there's protective coverings, but from a million times over, like the normal, like surviving a million times over the regular half-life.
but the regular half-life is in a lab. It's in a petri dish. This is what I'm talking about. Think about archaea bacteria. They are living, I don't know how long, long periods of time underneath mountains of earth. Right?
Well, what's wrong is you've got the millions. You've got the million. Actually, it's more than that. It's the billions. You're seeing them surviving for billions of years.
Yes, I am, and you're seeing them for thousands. Because I don't know where you're getting the archaea bacteria. I mean, did God just create them down there to I don't know what's the purpose down there, but you know, or did they get
It's
buried
all
in the
part of
flood?
our
I don't know, but
environment. It's all part of our environment. But I can't get into the mind of God about why, a particular group of bacteria is in a particular location.
well, anyway, I mean, one thing that's interesting about this, okay, but I'm talking again about this particular video that I watched. It's the only creationist video I've watched in 20 years, and I thought it was very well done. So kudos to them. Is that they now made their own hypothesis, which I think is fantastic. They said we're going to find DNA in here. And the reason why they're saying that is because they're saying, well, mammoths died at the same time we can get mammoth DNA, so we're going to get DNA out of here, right? And I think it's wonderful that they created a hypothesis and they're going to try and test it. Great. And I also think it would be fantastic if they find it. Now, even if they find DNA, I'm not going to say, okay, it's show's over. Yes, young Earth creationism is correct, but but it would be interesting because I think the next thing they might do is create a dinosaur, kind of like Jurassic Park, and then see how maybe they can even equip humans with stone tools like the pre-flood people had, or maybe they had advanced technology. I don't know, and they could figure out how humans and these gigantic dinosaurs with these huge teeth could live together without dying. I think that would just be wonderful.
Nathan, we live with giant animals now without dying. Look, an elephant can trample you if you get in its way, but you don't have to go and get trampled,
I,
right?
I,
And there's people who would hunt an elephant. So, dinosaurs
yes.
are not that big. I mean, they're some of them are bigger than an elephant, but they're not that big.
So do you think do you think humans hunted these gigantic creatures?
I do. Yeah.
And did they eat them?
I don't know if they tasted good, so I can't really say that. I have no
I'm,
idea.
I mean, if we
Probably.
find, if we, this would be great. If we found a Tyrannosaurus Rex with, cuts from a flint spearhead. I mean, wouldn't that be great for creationists, right?
Yeah, it would.
We haven't found it yet, I don't think, but maybe you can pull something up for me. So,
Well, I already gave you the old artifacts that you wanted. You said if you could find an artifact.
okay, well, I'll have to go look at it. I mean, I say these things, but then, do I actually want to read through all of this stuff and figure it out? I don't know. So, I'm also a human. So there's only so much time I want to spend, but I do think that I did slightly address it by showing you the picture of the petrified tree, right? And how it could work its way down into lower levels of the you know the stratification of materials. So, uh, I don't think we've found a carriage or a wooden wheel from a human at the basement of you know wherever creationists say that the flood started, right, or whatever. So I assume with the flood, if there's this huge churning mass of water over the entire surface of the earth that is covering all the mountains and all the land masses, and there was actually human civilization, I assume, maybe rightly or wrongly, that there would be some sort of human artifacts way down at the bottom, right? Why are there no pyramids down there? Especially if the aliens built the pyramids or whatever, or the Nephilim built the pyramids or something. I mean, why don't we have a pyramid down at the basement?
Well, actually, there's sort of a weird thing I read about. One of the Great Lakes or something has some kind of Stonehenge type thing under there. Have you seen that? Okay, I don't want to
No.
get my facts wrong, but I did see that. They did find something like that. Okay, so
Well,
it
and,
was
and
in the
and
news
maybe
in
it's
the
the
last 2 years.
panspermia.
What's that?
Even if you do find that, even if you do find that, maybe it is an alien civilization that colonized our planet. I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that I can also, on the evolution side, play whack-a-mole with the evidence, right? So, but getting back to the dinosaurs, I do think that this is an interesting case where, again, maybe the scientific community has not taken it seriously enough, right? Because it doesn't fit with their model, and they need to be on guard against that. I think the other thing they need to be on guard against, and I said it last week, I'll say it again, is that I think evolutionists and old Earth people, they need to they need to get more savvy about how they're communicating this information to people. I mean, you talked about how there's all this media about these things, but I do think that in some ways, creationists are better at the I don't know what you'd call it, not the apologetics, but just um I'm trying to think of the name Aristotle gave it or whatever, but I can't. It's in poetics, but basically the
Rhetoric.
teaching of people, the
Mhm.
teaching of people about things, because even us, we get into these really complicated scientific topics and people tune out, right? So you need to have something that is clear that people know, okay, yeah, I can understand this. So I don't know. Anyway, I give them collagen. I think this was a great find, and I think that people are doing it. All right, here we go.
Jamie Russell says a close look at dinosaur tissue screams biblical young Earth model. Woo! Young Earthers, unite!
Yeah,
The
well, I do think I think this is a good win for the. I'm not going to lie. I think this is a coup for the young Earth creationists. But I do think that it can be explained, and it will be explained eventually by scientific experimentation if they put their energy towards it. Or maybe
cool.
not. The,
Richard Fricks says communion of saints. Okay. So anyway, go
is
ahead.
that us? Is that we're having the communion of the saints here?
I don't know. I have no idea what he means by that, but yeah, maybe. I mean, we are two saints communing and talking about these issues, and so yeah. But well, I'm glad you give me the point. So I guess we have an early end, but I want to know how many points do I need to sway you away from evolution?
Well,
And
I
not,
would
it
say
doesn't have
probably
to be old Earth. I mean, young Earth, but anti-evolution.
um, probably 1,000, honestly. 1,000.
Do
So
you
good
feel
luck.
like you have 1,000 reasons to believe in evolution?
I think that I think evolution and old Earth is part and parcel. I mean, I I was at one time an old Earth creationist, and I I appreciate that there are old Earth creationists and that they you know formulate things in terms of God doing these separate creation events. And um, to me, I think that the old Earth evolutionist worldview is a complete story. And I think that in some ways, to me, it's a non. I mean, I think that it does create problems for Christians. I do think, or people of religions, because they have to look at their own creation stories in a different way. Um, and so it makes things more complicated. But I think any serious student of a religion is going to run into those problems anyway, not just with a creation story, but also with other things in your literature, your religion, or whatever. So I do think that it would be very difficult to budge me on the old Earth creationism, or back to old Earth creationism. Um, yeah, I think it's hard. I think it would be very difficult.
So, to be honest with you, I pretty much agree that like young Earth, like basically old Earth, and doesn't really work that well with the creation. Like I used to listen to Hugh Ross when I was trying to figure these things out. I read the books of the old Earth creationists, and I could not make heads or tails of it. Like what I mean is, it didn't seem to go together. The young Earth perspective is the one that makes sense according to, the basically the description of the fossil record and the understanding of how basic the creation and everything. So to me, young Earth makes sense. So do you feel like you would be closer to going to young Earth if you like? Could you be more easily convinced toward young Earth if there was enough evidence in favor of it?
Mhm. Like I said, I think you have to overcome all of the other evidence, because one of the problems I have with young Earth is if you find yourself saying God created the universe with the appearance of time, like, I believe that's possible. I believe we could have started a minute ago and been created with all the memories of our former life. But I don't. Then it comes down to a character issue, and it's a theological issue for me at that point, because if God created the world with the appearance of age, doesn't that seem deceptive? Especially if there's some judgment related to it, like, oh, you didn't believe me, my story about the young Earth, uh, but of course I created all this evidence that it's old. Right. So I do think that then it becomes a character issue, because I do think there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that the universe itself is old. um Regardless of where we find ourselves with the stratification of Earth, or the minerals on Earth, or the dinosaurs, or whatever of life, to me, the fact that we see light from distant sources, even a million years away, that already, to me, um, negates the idea that the universe is young. And so, if I even start with that, all of this other stuff is window dressing, right? That's what I think. But
Okay, so you're telling me if I want to hit you at the root, it's cosmology.
yeah, because I mean, I understand cosmology a lot better than I do dinosaur and fossil bones. I think, and to me, light. The fact that light is constant or the that time slows down, and just the fact that time slows down and speeds up, to me, that seems to indicate that the 7 days that everybody is so focused on, which is an increment of time, it it's immaterial. And it's, especially if you think about 7 days and the biblical meaning of seven, and resting, and all of this stuff. There's so much meaning associated with it that has nothing to do with the actual time. Because what does one day even mean if there's no planet, and there's no sun, and the stars don't exist? What does the first day even mean? So, to me, uh, you know, that's why I say I think I think in some ways the young Earth creationism, and the all of this is, in a sense, it's kind of a weird post Enlightenment problem. I don't know if the ancients ever. I don't know if it was so much about the day span for them either, or whether it was the meaning of a day, a meaning of a week, a meaning of rest, that God rested from his labor, or whatever. You know what I mean? Or that God spoke things into existence. I mean, you know what I mean? It's to me, I just to me, like, it's kind of a weird argument that it has to be literal.
Well, I don't look, my focus is not really on the day, it must be literal. So it's more about the contradicting stories. In one story, you have God creating everything, and it seems that he's creating things as they are. It doesn't seem that he's telling us, I know it's not meant to be science, but it doesn't seem that he's telling the story of development over a slow process. It does seem like it's a miraculous event, or, with God, I don't know, it's just a work of God to create, and creating things according to their kind. So, and then, so this doesn't really, in many ways, and we don't have to go into all of it, but in many ways, it just doesn't match the evolutionary scenario. Now, I've heard people try to put it together and they can come up with some good stuff. Let me tell you, there are some good storytelling to get these to work together. And maybe that's what you're doing. But for me, it just, and if I was convinced by the scientific evidence, maybe I would smash it together and make it work. But I don't think that the scientific evidence for, evolution and this timeline is really strong. I actually think it's very lacking, like grossly lacking.
I think it's interesting that we're way off topic, but I think this is what's interesting to me about this whole thing. So we might as well talk about it because people could just turn
That's
off.
fine. Yep.
That you grew up in a family, right? I think our family is very interesting because we grew up in a family where faith was very, very important. But we also had the scientific perspective regarding geology and the universe, age of the universe, I think, generally provided. And so it's interesting to me. Do you really think? I mean, maybe it's hard to say. Do you really think when you look at all the evidence in cosmology, do you really think that the universe is 5,000 years old, Rebekah?
Well, I have to say that the distant starlight thing is a problem. Like, that is one thing that doesn't seem to make sense. It's one of those things where I do think my perspective of it is a little bit of just a rescue device, right? So I can understand that problem. And in fact, that's what makes Jeremy, my husband, for those who are not watching, he is not a young earth creationist. And it's primarily because of the distant starlight issue and the things that you're talking about with cosmology. So I can see that perspective. And I mean, I definitely think if I had to name off the biggest problems for young earth creation, that's probably number one. But but I think that there's so many problems with the evolutionary story. And, you mentioned God being deceptive, but were you talking about if he created, like, are you talking about the cosmology stuff specifically, or are you talking about, like, because, like, if God just created people and animals, like a person who, like, if God created an Adam and Eve, they're only one day old, but they would appear as a grown person, right? So
If
would that
Adam and
be,
Eve were created with belly buttons, I mean, this is a silly thing, but I think it's important in a way. If Adam and Eve were created with belly buttons, where it appeared that they had been severed from an umbilical cord of a mother, right? Then I think that might cause a moral problem for God, because he's creating things to look as if they had existed before he created them. And so that's the moral issue, I would say. And it's not huge, but I think it's fine if Christians say, okay, I believe God created it with the appearance of age. I actually don't have any problem. I mean, I think it is a problem theologically in a way, but I don't I'm not upset with him or something like that. I actually, strangely, I don't actually care if people believe in young Earth creationism on one level, because I think it's fine. And it's fine to live your life like that, because I think you might live a better life that way. So I'm
How does being a young Earth creationist make you a better person?
well. I think it could make you a better person, because your faith, which I think is wrong, but that adhering to that belief about the Bible doesn't impact your um, daily life that much, whether you whether you believe in evolution or in creation. Um, like on a physical level, what you're doing with that information doesn't impact your daily life that much. And I do think that philosophically, it's probably impossible to come up with with any type of moral compass that is actually grounded in physicality. Like, I don't think science creates meaning very well for humans. It's very nihilistic, I would say. You can believe that humans are still moral, but that you're just a biological algorithm, and that's moral because that was good for the herd or whatever, but it doesn't actually create meaning. Like, even if you believe that, that doesn't actually create much meaning. Once you understand that that's what it is, it might do the opposite. So, like, I actually have no problem if people want to believe young Earth creationism. I just don't think that it fits with the facts of science. So that's the problem I have, though.
Well, Nathan, one thing I do want to say about this distant starlight that I want you to actually consider and look into, because now I'm not saying it's the most straightforward interpretation, but we always have to think about where did we get our first interpretation, right? Like, what I mean is this, you know, uh, the model that I'm talking about, it does fit in line with physics. Okay. The alternate synchrony, where I talked to you about this before, where we are seeing the universe as it is. The starlight is making it instantly from the stars right now. We only observe the two-way speed of light. And Einstein even said, I'm choosing to make the speed of light the same in both directions, but it actually, that's a convention. So it's because, like, it's possible that the way that we have been raised in this convention is making the distant starlight a problem when it's
Uh,
actually not a
uh,
problem.
well, I totally disagree with that. I mean, we talked about this, but just a satellite. You send a signal to the satellite, it travels at the speed of light. You send a signal back, it travels at the speed of light. And you have to account for relativity of the satellite moving at a different time period, because the things that we're doing now are so precise in our daily life. Using your cell phone is so precise that you have to account for that tiny measure of time, that difference between the satellite and the Earth. So the theory of relativity, we use it every day. We don't know
Yeah,
that we're
this is
using it.
not against the theory of relativity. Just,
Yes,
I'll
it
send you
is.
something on this. I'll
Okay.
send you something
Uh,
on this
but
because
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
But one of the things that's interesting to me is that the area of scientific knowledge that I think I'm most acquainted with, which is Big Bang cosmology and physics, let's just say, is actually the area of science where I am most confirmed in my belief in God. Because if you look at what scientists are thinking about the universe at present, they're saying things like, there's the holographic principle, that we might all be a hologram based on a lower dimensional surface. With I mean, it's just like there's all there's all these things that the physicists are coming up with now related to black holes and everything, that really seem to point to that there is something else, you know, cosmic going on. The fact that there might be, people are debating what dark matter is, and that dark matter might actually be a whole set of things, and that the reality that we're seeing, a whole set of different particles, maybe not just one particle, but a whole different set of particles, and that it might be also evolving over time. I just read a article about that. There was just speculation, but it's like, well, is dark matter evolving rather than dark energy? And when you realize that most of the universe that we see, it seems like it's only a small portion of what really is. Okay, that screams to me that there is something going on, right? More than what meets the eye here. Now, whether that's Hinduism or Christianity, that doesn't say anything about what it is, or just an alien computer that's running, and we're all a simulation on their computer. I mean, it doesn't tell you what is going on, but it does tell you that the universe is a much stranger place than we realize. And so, to me, the area where I'm most confident in scientific knowledge is also the place that I'm most confident, that I feel affirmed in my faith, which is strange. Or maybe it's not strange.
Cool. That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, I have an unfair friend, and he says, "Watch this, Nathan. She's right," and gives a video link. And so this is probably going to be talking about, the light time travel. So Veritasium agrees with Rebekah, and he ain't no young earther. Okay. So, okay, Jamie, I'm gonna send this to Nathan, this link in, a better form where he can, I'll send it to his phone, and I'll send him some other stuff on this, to show him that the idea that we have, I'm not saying it's the most like straightforward as far as our understanding what we've grown up with the idea of starlight, but it is completely in line with physics. So I know you have an argument against that, but you haven't actually even listened, and I'm not a physicist, so I can't do a good job
Okay, all right.
giving this to you. But that's really interesting that for you, that the ideas, the universe, and different things are such a source of like connecting with God.
Well, you're going to have to connect with something next week. So we're going to look at the age of stars. So we've been mucking around in the muck for too long on Earth. So I wanted to do one where we're going back to space and looking at the way that stars evolve on the main sequence, to show that the universe is old.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to it because I have done some study on this in the past. It's not totally fresh in my mind, but I look forward to hearing how this is arguments for the evolutionary timeline. So, yeah, that'll be fun. Okay, well, thanks everybody for watching, and please join us next week. And if you have scientific expertise that you want to chime in and tell us, please do in the comments. And thanks for your participation. Have a good night.